Acting President Han Duck-soo has been actively working to reassure the country's partners about its commitment to security and stability despite the political uncertainty within national borders. Now, following talks with US President Joe Biden on the phone this past weekend, Han also reached out to Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba today. With more on Press Perspective. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Thursday, December 18th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Today, we touch upon the broader security implications of the political uncertainty here in the country amid brewing tensions with North Korea and a power transition in the US. For more on this, I have Chloe Borgnon with France 24 here in the studio. Chloe, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
I also have Professor Park Won-gon at Ewha Womans University with us virtually. Professor Park, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Chloe, we will start here in the studio. As I mentioned at the start, the acting president has been quite busy seeking to ease diplomatic concerns about Korea's political fallout. Now, he had talks with US President Joe Biden last Sunday and talks with the Japanese Prime Minister today. Tell us a bit more about his efforts.
Yeah, so the phone call on Sunday, the 15th, was between acting President Han Duck-soo and US President Joe Biden. It was a 16-minute call, so that's quite a long one. And it's interesting to see that it was the day after the impeachment vote. So really, the US did not wait to get back in contact with South Korea. The goals here were to reassure the allies, same with the call with the Prime Minister, like Japanese Prime Minister. It's reassuring South Korean allies, bring back stability into the foreign diplomacy, because obviously with all what happened in the past 2 weeks, diplomacy has been a bit shaken. And also mend the link, this very special bond with the US, because it's one of the main thing that the United States said right after the declaration of martial law. They were like, we were not made aware of it before. And it's kind of a remark that kind of stayed there, that the US were like we were pushed to the back on this situation. So the acting President Han Duck-soo said that it was important to solidify the South Korean and the US defense, like common defense posture in face of common challenges posed by North Korea mostly. We might come back on this point later. And President Joe Biden said that the ironclad US and South Korea alliance remained unchanged, and he also complimented South Korea for the resilience and the maturity of the democracy. So in the White House statement, the US president said that he expressed his appreciation actually for this resilience. We spoke about it last week, about the stability and the need for the US to have stability here in South Korea. And that's kind of what perspired into this call, actually. And it's also important for the South Korean government to be able to mend this relationship, this very specific relationship with the US before the mandate of Donald Trump. That might bring some uncertainty, and so that's also what this call was for. And same thing with Japanese Prime Minister today. It was kind of a way to say, we are still here and things are going on forward from now on.
Right, they did reaffirm their commitment to bilateral ties. That is the talk between Mr. Han and, of course, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. And before we delve further, Chloe, could you tell us a bit about Han Duck-soo and his current role?
Yeah, so let's start with his current role. So since the suspension of President Yoon Suk-yeol on Saturday the 14th at 7:24 p.m., he got, from the presidential power, the constitution states that the prime minister has to take over as an acting role. So he's acting president right now. Until when? That's the big question. So now the constitutional court is judging if they have to decide if they want to remove Yoon Suk-yeol from his presidential office or not. So as long as there is no president, well, the prime minister has to be acting president. So it could take up to 180 days for the Constitutional Court to decide if they want to remove Yoon Suk-yeol or not. If they don't remove him, he'll come back, be president again. If they remove him, it's 2 more months, like maximum 60 days, to get another election, presidential election, and once the president is elected, then again the acting president can step down and give the spot again. There's an important point there, is that the constitution doesn't detail how much power he has. So most of the experts are saying he should, have a limited level of powers, just to go through the main affairs, make sure that the state is not paralyzed, and make sure that the government is functioning through this grave political crisis. And that's also, there was a press conference for foreign journalists recently, like yesterday, and there was the Minister of Economy and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and one of the messages that they delivered was to say, like, business, governmental affairs are going on, and the government officials are working and are back into motion, and things are going on in the usual way. So that's kind of the message that they want to convey now. And so regarding Mr. Duck-soo himself, so he's a 75 years old technocrat. He's been prime minister under Yoon Suk-yeol mandate since the beginning. It's interesting to see that in his 30 plus years career, he's been at level like leading position both under the Democrats and under the conservative leaders, and that's something that could be a very strong point for him when we see that today the political field is quite divided, and they might need here in South Korea a bit of someone who's able to navigate through both sides and try to help them mend each other again.
Right. Try to help them bridge the gap over differences then. Professor Park, Mr. Duck-soo reached out to U.S. military authorities to reaffirm commitment to security in light of possible provocations by Pyongyang as well. Now, some scholars here believe that North Korea may refrain from acts of aggression, if you will, for a while, as it hopes to see the opposition Democratic Party of Korea win a snap election. Do you, Professor Park, share this outlook?
Well, actually, I agree with that, because we are seeing this very interesting reaction by North Korea, because North Korea has reported on the situation in South Korea twice since the declaration of martial law. And these both reports are factual, not the interpret at all, and did not strongly advocate their own views, evaluation or policy directions. And this very cautious approach reflected North Korea's very deliberate stance toward the current situation in South Korea. And I think this is a very stark contrast to their previous very strong and highly critical rhetoric against the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. The Yoon administration, we all know that, has implemented the most very strong and robust deterrence policy toward North Korea among the all South Korean government to date. So as a result, North Korea has been restrained from carrying out limited provocation against South Korea. I can say that deterrence is working. So more about the Yoon administration institutionalized with the United States so-called extended deterrence policy to strengthen security measures and enhance trilateral security cooperation between South Korea, United States, and Japan to deter North Korea further. So in this context, North Korea would likely view President Yoon's impeachment process as kind of a favorable development. However, if North Korea criticized the Yoon administration or engaged in provocation during this very sensitive time, it could face criticism for interfering in South Korea's domestic political situation. So therefore, North Korea is expected to proceed with a very extreme caution and restraint. Additionally, you asked me this question, since the Democratic Party emphasized engagement with North Korea, Pyongyang may view it more favorable compared to the People Power Party.
Staying with that, Professor Park, then, hypothetically speaking, of course, do you suppose an opposition victory of the snap election here in South Korea will perhaps offer the international community with a perhaps fresh opportunity to address tensions on the Korean peninsula?
Well, as mentioned just before, North Korea might perceive this current situation in South Korea as advantageous to to exercise restraint in its provocations. And additionally, with North Korea's currently deploying troops to the Russian-Ukraine war, its capacity for aggressive actions towards South Korea is somewhat limited. However, the possibility of South Korea's domestic political turmoil increasing instability on the Korean Peninsula cannot be completely ruled out. So for example, with a potential inauguration, with the upcoming inauguration of Trump's administration on January 20th, North Korea may seek to assert its presence by intentionally heightening tension on the peninsula. From this perspective, this prolonged political instability in South Korea is undesirable for sure. And also it is crucial for political stability to be restored quickly so that security conditions, especially including ROK-US alliance, can be also stabilized.
Right, and speaking about the return of a Donald Trump administration in the U.S. next month, Chloe, there is also talk about the possibility of another summit between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un. And this talk came about because of the return, I believe, of a key figure who helped negotiate the previous summits under the first Trump administration. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular person and the prospects of such a summit between Kim Jong-un and Mr. Trump?
Yeah, so this person is Alex Wong. He's been nominated as Deputy National Security Advisor on the 22nd of November. So just for you to know, this is in the White House national security lineup is number 2. So that's quite an important key role there. And it's also interesting to note that in the statement announcing his nomination, Donald Trump emphasized his expertise on North Korea, and he said about Alex Wong, and I'm quoting him here, he helped negotiate my summit with North Korean leader Kim. So he was also, second in command in the denuclearization talk with North Korea at the time on the first term of Donald Trump. And so this very strong, high-level role, also this emphasis from Donald Trump when nominating him, that's what is bringing the speculations about the fact that these discussions with North Korea might come back. There is also a thing about it is to know, to kind of withdraw a little bit this idea that this negotiation will happen very soon. There are other matters at end for Donald Trump as well. So he's been speaking about the fact that he wants to speak again with Kim Jong-un. He said it during his campaign, but he's also been speaking about the Ukraine war, the Russian war in Ukraine, saying that he wants to, put an end to that as well. The Middle East right now is quite full of tension. So those are also matters that are going to be at end for the Trump administration when they get back in office. And another thing is, Donald Trump has been clear on that. For him, diplomacy is America first. So he's not going to engage in everything altogether. So the speculation about the discussion is probably right, because, we're probably going to discuss that again, but North Korea's threats and nuclearization issues and the fact that it's getting closer to Russia right now are matters that cannot be ignored by the US. But the question is, will it be really a first-hand matters when the Trump administration gets into office? This is more of, the question.
Right. And aside from face-to-face talks between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un, Professor Park, some analysts claim that the incoming Trump administration may resume the so-called back-channel diplomacy with North Korea. Now, does the power vacuum here in South Korea, Professor Park, raise the possibility of the new U.S. administration perhaps sidelining South Korea from engagements with the Kim Jong-un regime? And if that is the case, Professor Park, what would be the repercussions of that reality?
Well, as Chloe just mentioned, that the appointment of the Alex Wong and Richard Grenell can be seen as the reflection of Trump's willingness to engage in dialogue with North Korea. So in Trump's effort to engage with North Korea, I think there is some possibility that South Korea could be sidelined to some extent. But however, it is worth noting that during the Trump's first term, he often operates major foreign policy without close consultation or cooperation with allies and friendly nations. Trump favors so-called White House-centered or president-centered approach, preferring to personally oversee diplomacy rather than relying on the systemic effort by the State Department. And during the Trump's first term, cooperation between South Korea and the United States was largely facilitated through the communication channel established between then South Korean Special Representative Lee Do-hun and U.S. Special Representative Stephen Biegun, rather than through any special consideration for South Korea by Trump. So the key question here is that what issue and agenda Trump would want to discuss with Kim Jong-un. In my view, as Trump has indicated in recent interviews, including his Newsweek interview and one 3 days ago, his primary agenda may focus on securing the withdrawal of the North Korean troops deployed in the Russian-Ukraine war as a step toward ending the conflict. We all know that ending the Russian-Ukraine war is the top priority of the central promise in Trump's foreign policy agenda. So to achieve this, Trump has essentially stated that removing North Korea's troops from the conflict is a necessary first step. And secondly, Trump would not want North Korea to cause disruptions while he focuses on resolving the Russian-Ukraine war and the Middle East issues. From this perspective, Trump may aim to restore dialogue channels with North Korea to keep the regime under his control. And another critical question is then, what about the Kim Jong-un? Does he have any intention to meet Trump this time? Well, given the humiliation Kim Jong-un has experienced at the Hanoi summit in February 2019, he is unlikely to agree to meeting easily. Based on Kim's so-called front breakthrough line, the strategy announced in December 2022, and his very recent speech at the National Defense Development Conference 2024, North Korea is very clearly mentioning, and Kim Jong-un himself mentioned that they expect to have some kind of precondition for resuming dialogue with the United States. And specifically, they are talking about two important things. One is their right to development, and the other is their right to survival. So overall, it seems unlikely that the United States and North Korea will easily come to the table for talks. And even if they do meet, reaching an agreement will be significantly more challenging than during the 2018-19 periods, given the vast different circumstances.
Right. And against this backdrop, Chloe, a recent commentary published by U.S. think tank RAND appears to suggest that the incoming Trump administration should accept North Korea as a nuclear state. What exactly does it say? And also, Chloe, do tell us how other designated nuclear states, like France, of course, would respond to a Trump administration accepting North Korea as a nuclear power.
Yeah, so in this article, the RAND think tank said that they came back actually to the failure of the Hanoi summit in 2019 that Professor Park just mentioned, saying that from this point and from the defeat at that moment for the Kim Jong-un regime, we've seen a rise of bellicosity from North Korea that's been increasing in the years, and that's leading to what we see now with North Korea engaging with Russia. And so they are saying that Donald Trump has said that he wants to reunite and he wants to start dialogue again, but that there is new challenges to be taken in account. And so they list quite a few of them, but it's interesting to see so that they're saying that there's the question of the Juche doctrine. So that's the idea that North Korea has to be self-reliant and have its own self-defense, which were the main argument to develop the nuclear weapons, actually. This is a doctrine that's currently been a bit of changed by Kim Jong-un, but it's one point that it's hard to know now what the regime is really thinking and really, all they're really developing through that. But the second thing is, obviously, North Korea has been getting closer to Russia, and they need less the US to exist on the international scene. So they've been taking steps actually toward being a more confident nuclear state. So they are kind of different from the last time Donald Trump talked to North Korea. So what they're saying is that because of all those changes and new challenges, there might be a point where the US will have to stop clinging to denuclearization of North Korea as a preliminary state, and instead accept the fact that they are a nuclear-powered nation, and from there on go on to make sure that they restrain their nuclear power, actually. So what they're saying is basically, let's stop speaking about denuclearization first and accept that nuclearization is here, and instead make sure that they do not develop too many weapons. They're also saying that actually it's part of the propaganda from North Korea, saying the US are threatening North Korea or trying to take away our means of defense. And in the Rand article, what they're saying is, if you tell them you're a nuclear-powered nation, you're kind of taking that away from the propaganda. Then there will be, obviously, so that's one scenario developed by this think tank. I'm not sure that's the kind of scenario that the US would follow, but it's interesting to see if that was to happen. I would say most of the other countries that are nuclear-powered countries will not accept it. If I'm taking just the stance of France, France is part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty Agreement, and they're quite strict on that. I mean, France is one of the big nuclear-powered and nuclear weapons of nation. But if you look at the example of France, for example, on Iran, on the Iran question, they are really saying that the nuclear escalation is dangerous in Iran. They are calling for negotiation to make sure that the program does not develop too much. And on North Korea, they're also watchful on the matter. France has voted in the past, the UN section, against North Korean development of ballistic program for nuclear and nuclear tests. And they are saying that they see North Korean nuclear program as dangerous for the world, and they are kind of calling for the non-proliferation. So they would probably not accept to call North Korea a nuclear country, actually.
Right. So while France would be in strong opposition against a nuclear North Korea, what, Professor Park, would be perhaps the implications if the incoming Trump administration decides to accept North Korea as a nuclear power? What would that mean for us here in South Korea? And as a scholar, what are your thoughts regarding such a possibility?
Well, I agree with what just Chloe mentioned, because it's very less likely that the United States and, of course, another for the officially recognized nuclear weapon state by the 1968 NPT treaty, including France, to acknowledge North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state. Because if it would allow that North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state, it simply dismantle the 1968 NPT treaty, and it's can bring some kind of a domino effect to going nuclearized many countries, including South Korea too, probably Japan, even Taiwan too. So I don't think Trump administration, and especially President Trump himself, would accept North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state. But at this moment, it is true that the Washington, D.C., and overall the dominant view or the idea about the denuclearization of North Korea is unrealistic. Because for past several years, North Korea has achieved at least their capability to attack South Korea. And Kim Jong-un himself continuously mentioned that he has no intention to resume any kind of a denuclearization talk. He keeps saying that some kind of arms reduction talk, and arms reduction talk means that it's considering North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state. So overall, I don't think it's officially accepted. North Korea is officially accepted as the de facto nuclear weapon state, but it is very important that whether United States continue, especially President Trump and Trump administration, continue to provide so-called extended transport for the South Korea or not, but because we all know that the Trump administration sees the allies' relationship with a transactional way. So the Trump administration demands most of the allies and friendly countries to increase their defense sharing. So without that, the Trump mentioned several times, and he probably undermined his defense commitment and security commitment for the allies' countries. So all this is a very important moment, but I don't think Trump administration, Trump himself would accept North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state.
Right, and hopefully, Professor Park, you are right then, for the security of the Korean Peninsula and that of the world as well. Professor Park, as always, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, and Chloe, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow, that is Friday.